Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme today we'll be discussing the US presidential election that's just got very interesting now that Joe Biden has been forced to withdraw from the presidential election race and to be replaced by his Vice President Kamala Harris, and she will now be up against Donald Trump in November. We'll be asking who will win, either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. So in this programme today, I'm joined by Maureen Martin, who's the new parliamentary officer for the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, and together with Robert Harris from Voice for Justice. So welcome to the programme. It's great to have you both on the programme. Robert, I'll start off with you because firstly, we all owe you, including our viewers, a debt of gratitude for all that you do and all that the team at Voice for Justice UK do in defending our freedoms where it matters in Parliament. Do you want to give us an update on the very important work that you and your ministry are doing to protect our precious Christian freedoms in this country?
We're doing quite a lot of things as a team. Since the autumn of last year, there's been the Commission of Inquiry into Discrimination Against Christians, which has been sitting and hearing from witnesses, Christians who say they have been discriminated on account of their faith. We've been hearing their testimonies, and this is going to last, God willing, for at least 2 years, if not longer. Most of the witnesses have been public. They've spoken over Zoom. We have a dedicated website where all the testimonies can be heard. Several people prefer to remain anonymous, which is absolutely fine. We've catered for that, and they've been heard privately. We are currently putting together an interim report which is for the attention of Parliament, and that, God willing, will go out in September.
Excellent. So looking forward to September. And great to see you, Maureen, as well. So when you were on last month, you were sharing about your new job as a parliamentary officer for the Society for the Protection of the Unborn Children. Do you want to share with us how your job's going, and have you made any allies in Parliament so far that can advocate for pro-life?
It's going quite well, Simon. With this new Parliament, obviously we've got 300 new MPs, most of them Labour, but some Lib Dems and some Conservatives. So obviously these new MPs don't have any voting records. So we have to reach out to them to try and get them on side. It's going to be a little difficult with Labour, but we're going to try. That's my job. My job is to reach out to these new MPs to see where they're at as individuals and maybe, hopefully, try to get them on side, build a relationship and see how it goes from there. But we are facing some significant threats with this new Labour government: assisted dying and the decriminalisation of abortion. Now, assisted dying, there is already a bill with the House of Lords.
Yeah, which is a private member's bill.
Yeah, it's a private member's bill. They're moving quite quickly on that. The second hearing is going to be November the 15th, so we're really on top of that. We've got a campaign going to mobilise our grassroots to really contact their MPs to make sure that they are aware that their grassroots, the members of their constituencies, are against this. And with the decriminalisation of abortion, they haven't actually done anything yet, but we're thinking it's also going to be a private member's bill in that sense too. So we are really on the ball with keeping a really beady eye on these situations so that we can at least mobilise our members. And anyone watching who wants to get involved in the fight, please contact our website, that's spark.org.uk, and get involved. We need your assistance, please. Help us.
Wonderful, thank you, Maureen. And we're talking about the US presidential elections. I can say that probably one of the most dramatic political events that we've had in American politics, maybe in decades, if not in a very, very long time. The fact we had the disastrous presidential election debate performance by Joe Biden, followed by an attempted assassination on Donald Trump that failed, which then gave Donald Trump an incredible ascendancy. And then we've seen that I believe that Joe Biden was then forced to withdraw from the presidential election race, only to be replaced by Kamala Harris, his vice president, has now injected a kind of new enthusiasm and energy into the Democratic presidential election campaign. What are your thoughts on these dramatic political events the other side of the Atlantic?
Well, so much has happened, and so there's so much to unpack. When we watched that presidential debate between Trump and Biden, yes, it was a terrible embarrassment for Biden, for him to lose the train of his thought. many are saying this is the most embarrassing political episode in televised political history, and I don't think that's stretching it too much. Many people, certainly those on the other side of the political divide, said, well, this is not a surprise, because even before the 2020 election, there was a lot of evidence to show that Biden was already declining mentally. So this was not a surprise. And it has been said that the media in America, large parts of it, have been protecting him all along until recently, rather than holding him to account, as they should with every politician on either side of the political spectrum. So none of this has been too surprising, but it's been quite shocking. What's interesting is that what happened after that, because calls were growing over the days for him to stand down, even within his own party, stand down from, standing for the presidency again. And of course, it reached a crescendo to the point where you think this is a matter of when, not if. The question is, how was he made to resign his bid for the presidency? And I don't think we're going to hear about this for many decades to come. I don't think he did this voluntarily, because it was absolutely clear from the interviews he gave, he had no intention of standing down. It may be that they threatened him privately with the 25th Amendment, which in very rare circumstances could be used to say, you're mentally incapable, you need to stand down, and they can force that on him. So he announced that he's standing down. He didn't give any reasons why. We know the reasons why, of course. It's interesting, isn't it? Just a few days before he stood down, he was isolating with COVID. Now, at the moment, I don't hear of any public figures isolating with COVID. And I think it was very convenient for those around him to discuss openly and transparently in the White House, without him physically being there, what do we do now? How do we get rid of this man in the right way? And he was not in the picture, so they could actually have that open discussion without him being present. So I think it's clear that he didn't go voluntarily. So now, of course, all the focus is on Kamala and what the prospects are of her, taking the presidency.
I did actually hear back in the beginning of the year that the Democrats were planning to dump Biden for the before the Democratic convention, and the Democratic convention in August announced their new presidential candidate, because the plan always was to have Trump as the Republican nominee for president, because they felt that he's such an isolated, divisive figure that if they put a new face in the summer, this could then derail Trump's election campaign.
I think it's very interesting, the timing of the presidential debate. Generally speaking, you don't have a presidential debate as early as it was done. And I suspect, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this, it was deliberately done that early as a test to see how Joe Biden performs. And if he fails that test, then they will have an excuse to get rid of him.
Exactly. And Maureen, share with our viewers why this year's US presidential elections is so critical and important for Christians in the United States, but also for Bible-believing Christians all over the world.
Absolutely. I mean, America is still world leaders, regardless of the fact that the economy is, suffering and they're experiencing so many other things that are negative in the nation. They are still world leaders. And we have things like, very fundamental things like the freedom of speech. We've got wars that are potentially breaking out in hotspots around the world. We've got Middle East, we've got Ukraine, and potentially Taiwan. So whoever comes to the presidency has to deal with those things, and hopefully someone who wants to make peace and not war. Because otherwise we're going to have a serious situation of world war on our hands. There's also the free speech issue. We've had, in America, pro-life Christians being arrested outside of abortion clinics, and we've had the same thing here. We have Isabel Vaughan Bruce, she was arrested just for standing outside in a buffer zone for supposedly praying silently. So these fundamental issues are at stake here, and we must realise that the president, whoever ascends to the presidency, is going to affect all of our lives. As we've seen with Joe Biden, his failed presidency has affected all of our lives negatively so far. So whoever ascends to that position, or I shouldn't say ascend, gets voted in hopefully, gets voted in by the will of the people, will have a significant effect on us all. Free speech, censorship, and the potential of world wars. So it's very important that Christians pay attention to whoever is going to be the next president.
Yeah, good analysis. And what do you make of Donald Trump's election campaign? We know that he's now endorsed J.D. Vance as his vice president or vice presidential running mate, and that's the ticket they're running on. But what impact will the fact that Joe Biden now has stood down from the presidential election race have on Trump's chances of winning in November? Because when Biden was still running, he was about 9% ahead of Biden. I think that gap's closing now.
It is potentially. We're still in the very, very early days. Look, in the first few days since Kamala Harris announced that she's standing for the presidency, there's been enormous optimism within the Democrat Party. Certainly that's the portrayal that the media within America and abroad has given it. There's going to be a lot of testing, though, in the coming weeks and months. We're about 3 months away from the election. Let's not forget that there's early elections taking place in certain states. So actually, in some states, it's only weeks away. We're very, very close, closer than we think. People will have to decide, those of Democrat leanings will have to decide, do they want Kamala Harris as president? The moderates might be rather concerned about her because she is arguably on the far left of the party, ultra progressive. Those who are extreme progressives will be very happy that she has come to that position. So the party, like any party, is very divided on lots of issues. But I think at the moment the polls are a little bit divided and they're not really conclusive. We're only days away from her announcement. So it's very premature to actually say too much. There will be a lot of testing in the coming weeks and months.
Absolutely. And a big question, I think, Maureen, is to ask who is Kamala Harris? We know that she is the vice president currently. She has sadly had the worst approval record of any vice president in American history. She has been pretty much asleep on the job for the last 4 years, but now she finds herself in a position because no one else from the Democratic Party wanted to challenge her for the presidential nominee for the Democrats. So who is Kamala Harris and what does she represent, and why should our viewers be concerned?
She's ambitious and very extreme. While she was a senator, she was voted to be the most progressive senator in the Senate at that time. She's very dangerous. She got her first early promotions by having an extramarital relationship with Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco. That's how she got her first promotions and accelerated quite quickly through the Democratic Party. Rose up the ranks very quickly. She became DA of California, and under her leadership as DA, she refused to prosecute, or she refused the death penalty for cop killers. So that didn't make her very popular. Coming forward, she was complicit in covering up Joe Biden's obvious mental incapacities to be the president. She was complicit in covering that up, along with the mainstream media. And she has been consistently unpopular. In the primary race in 2020, she didn't even make it to Iowa. I mean, she didn't even get one vote. So she comes across as being very cold. Her bedside manner is not very warm, so to speak. And she's going to have a big challenge overcoming her past record. Her past record, she's carrying it like a big rucksack on her back. She's going to have a very challenging time trying to answer for her past record, which is very, very bad. But make no mistake, she's very ambitious and she's an opportunist.
Also, she makes incredible, awful gaffes, and no one can make sense of what she says, so that should be interesting. And Robert, it almost seemed as if when President Trump miraculously survived the assassination attempt on his life, and he did give credit for God in that, and he mentioned that at the Republican convention, and we saw a little bit more of a kind of humble Trump. How has the emergence of Kamala Harris as his new challenger for the presidency affected his campaign? And how will it change and alter the way he campaigns for the White House come November?
Well, in terms of personalities, it contrasts significantly with Biden because she's got energy. I mean, she's going to be 60 in October, and for a politician, that's relatively young. Compare that to Biden, who is in evident decline. I mean, you couldn't have a sharper contrast. However, it's all about policy, isn't it? Her policies are arguably way to the left of Biden. And I suspect that she has injected some of her ideological views into federal decision-making around Biden. So how this is helping or not helping Trump, it's difficult to say. He is certainly going to be pushing some of the same issues in the debate about sealing the border, because she was the border czar, although there seems to be denials that actually happened. And the Republican position, Trump's position and the Republican position, is that the border is open to millions. Some say between 7 up to 15 million people have come through. It depends what report you actually believe. So there is a disaster as far as sealing the border is concerned. And I think Trump is going to push that very hard. Whether it's Biden or Harris, he's going to push the same issues come the next presidential debate. Whether he makes any personal remarks against her, I don't know. It's very possible, very likely. But if he just keeps to the policies, then we're just going to see more of the same challenges that he posed to Biden.
But isn't the trouble with politics now, particularly in the West, it's no longer on policy, it's more on personality and
Sadly,
character?
that is the case, yeah.
And so how do you think Trump will do on the personality stakes?
You mean his personality or the way he attacks others?
But his personality, Kamala Harris's personality, the dynamics of the two, the impact that this will have on the US electorate.
I think the way people view personalities is going to be very personal, but character assassination is never a good thing in politics. And sadly, there's a lot of it going on in American politics. It doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. Maureen, I just want to pick up from what you last said about the very progressive liberal views held by Kamala Harris, because she sadly has now wanted to put the issue of abortion as her main campaign priorities and the focus of her presidential election campaign. She's calling her slogan "Restore Reproductive Freedom," whatever that means, and she wants to restore the Roe v. Wade ruling. Share with your thoughts on a position of abortion, but also making the issue of abortion her main campaign focus for her presidential election bid.
Well, it's the only thing she can do, Simon, because all of her other policy points are disastrous, because she's a part of the Biden-Harris administration and it's a disaster. So the abortion issue is the only thing she can run on because of the Roe v. Wade being overturned. And she wants to sign a national abortion bill into place if she is the president. Even past viability, which means abortion up to birth, which is what we're fighting against. Spock is very much involved in the fight here when it comes to decriminalisation of abortion. So we're in the same fight. But her argument to present against Trump to the people is that he wants to sign in an anti-abortion law nationally, but he said he will not do that. Repeatedly has said he will not do that. But this is going to be her argument and her pitch to the American people. So we know that she's extreme. She actually equates the American idea of freedom with these reproductive freedom rights. She says, it's un-American to deny people the freedom of personal autonomy. But she's not thinking about the baby, okay? She's thinking just about the woman. If you listen to any of her speeches, she never mentions the baby. It's always about the woman. As far as she's concerned, I don't think that baby actually exists, because she never mentions it. It's always about the woman. Even in 2015, she advocated for legislation targeting crisis pregnancy centres as purveyors of misinformation. In other words, telling people the truth about abortion. As far as she's concerned, misinformation. Yeah. She's very dangerous.
And Maureen, do you think this will also bring alive the US presidential election campaign for Christians? Because we know that in the United States, the issue of abortion for so many born-again Christians is an election decider. And the fact is that if Kamala Harris is championing the issue of abortion, even abortion up to birth, surely this is also going to rally Christian supporters behind Trump like never before.
I don't know so much, Simon, because in recent polls, they asked people, what are your top issues? Abortion was not in the top 3. It was the border and the economy. Those were the top issues. Abortion was not on the priority list for most voters. They didn't narrow it down to just Christians. It was just a general poll of voters. And economy and border were top issues. Abortion was not a top issue. So I'm not sure it's going to play as big a role as they think it's going to play, because it's been devolved to the states. So it's not that you can't get an abortion, it's that you have to, if your state does not legalise or is not lawfully in that particular state, you have to go to another state. So it's been devolved. So it's not been,
Yeah. Well, we
outlawed.
Well, we hope American Christians become outraged by this and realise what's at stake for the unborn child. And moving on to kind of foreign affairs, Robert, we know, for example, that Kamala Harris, as Vice President, has been very hostile to Israel. She did make a very complimentary speech after meeting the Israeli Prime Minister in the White House, Benjamin Netanyahu. She said about her need to support Israel and Israel's right to defend herself. But just share with us what you think Kamala Harris' presidency will actually mean for Israel.
I think her position towards Israel is very mixed. Look, I think it was very convenient recently when Benjamin Netanyahu addressed Congress for the 4th time that she had another engagement related to her election. I don't think she wanted to be there. I don't think her instincts are naturally pro-Israel. Having said that, after October the 7th, she did, I suppose we could say, read the right script that was given to her. She did condemn what happened on October the 7th very, very strongly. She has stated very clearly that, that Israel has the right to defend itself. But at the same time, she's also been attacking the Israeli government for what is allegedly the very high death toll of civilians. And that tells me that she is just accepting uncritically the Hamas line of how many civilians have been killed. She's not questioning that. She's made it very clear that she's more than sympathetic to the protesters, although she's made it equally clear that she doesn't accept everything they say. I think this does tell you that a Kamala Harris presidency would be similar to Biden in the last 6 months, possibly worse. But it's very difficult because she has a number of Jewish groups within the Democrat Party who do support her for her bid to become president. So she's trying, I think she's really on a tightrope in the sense that she needs to please the more moderate wing of her party and the more ultra-progressive who are very hostile to Israel. So we have to just wait and see.
And Maureen, I mean, for the Democrats, this is a big advantage to allow Kamala Harris, the Vice President, to run for the presidential election race in November for a number of reasons. Firstly, she doesn't have to worry about being president or governing the United States of America and everything that involves, so she can give up all her free time to run for the presidency. We also see, for example, that the Democrats like her because she's a woman and she's a woman of color. And I think that this will go down very well amongst ethnic minorities in the States, as well as those on the progressive left, as well as being able to mobilize Generation Z and also millennial generation to come out and vote for her. But isn't it important that we actually look and see what she stands for and what she represents before people said, okay, it's a fresh face, we'll vote for Kamala Harris come November the 5th?
Well, she's not a fresh face, is she?
But she's been presented as a fresh face.
I know, but she owns the Biden-Harris disaster. It's a combined ticket. When they voted for the Biden-Harris, just like it's going to be Trump and Vance, right? She owns it all. She's the border czar. It's a complete and utter disaster. She did nothing. We've had 50 million, potentially 50 million, could be less or more, illegal immigrants come into the US. And it's not just a border state issue anymore. Every state is now a border state. So she owns the entire thing. And to your point about being a black and a woman, there's only one demographic she can guarantee the vote from: single black females. African American men are swinging definitely to the right. If Harris was a man, a black man, they might consider but they will not vote for her just because she's a black woman. That is the black African-American man. They are swinging definitely to Trump because he's a bloke, he's strong, he almost got shot. They can identify with him because he's
always getting arrested and
exactly,
they can identify with him.
Exactly, so they can identify with him. So she's not going to have just a blanket vote from black people. And she is a DEI hire, as it were, but they cannot guarantee that every black or ethnic minority in America will vote for her just because of that. If that's what they're banking on, they're going to be very disappointed.
And Robert, aren't we in a very dangerous situation now that Joe Biden has announced that he's no longer standing in this presidential election race? Now this has created a huge power vacuum. We know, for example, that the enemies of the West are amassing, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and all the Islamic terrorist organizations as well see weakness when it comes to the US presidency and the US response to these major crises. Is it going to come in the matter of days or weeks before Joe Biden is actually forced to resign as president and Kamala Harris is sworn in as America's 47th president?
It's very possible. Look, I think since this disaster that happened at the presidential debate with Biden, I think the question of who is actually running America has taken on a new level of visibility and urgency. He is clearly just being presented as, you know, the person who gives the speeches, he signs executive documents. I think there's a few options here. Either there's a group of people around him who are steering the ship in line with the Democrat Party's wishes, or it may just be one or two individuals who are steering the ship. We don't know. Perhaps it will be in a few decades' time when, you know, retired administration officials will come out and, you know, write a tell-all autobiography. We just don't know. I think it's very worrying, certainly on the international stage, that you have a president who is clearly not in control.
Absolutely. So Robert and Maureen, thank you so much for joining me on this week's Politics Day. Both done a great job, thank you. And I want to thank you for watching at home. You might not think that the US presidential election has any impact on you living in the United Kingdom or in Europe, but it does, because whoever wins the White House will control the agenda for the next 4 years on the global stage. We know that we face major threats from the enemies of the West, such as Russia, such as China, such as the Islamic Republic of Iran, known as the axis of resistance. We need a strong America and a strong president, and we need to pray. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.